Hi, this is Lori Raby. I'm a family and pediatric nurse practitioner at Fox Rural Health Clinic, and I'm going to go over quarantine versus isolation for COVID-19 today. Let me get these slides where you can see them. Okay, so first we'll review quarantine versus isolation for COVID-19. Isolation is it keeps someone home who is sick or has tested positive for COVID-19 without symptoms, even without symptoms away from others, even in their own home. So who needs to isolate? You isolate if you are sick. People who had COVID-19 need to isolate. If they have symptoms of COVID-19 and able to recover at home, they can isolate at home. People that have no symptoms or essentially asymptomatic but have tested positive for COVID-19 need to stay at home as well. If you are told you had COVID-19 or you have symptoms of such, the steps to take when you go home are to monitor your symptoms. If you have emergency warning signs, as in you have difficulty breathing, you need to seek emergency medical care and call first. You need to stay in a separate room in your household away from other household members if possible. You need to use a separate bathroom if possible. Essentially, you need to avoid contact with other members of the household and your pets. You don't need to share personal household items like cups, towels, or eating utensils. And if you do have to come in contact with anybody in the household, you need to wear a mask around other people. So if you think you have COVID-19 or you know you have COVID-19 and you have symptoms, you will be home and isolated for at least 10 days since the symptoms first appeared, and within 24 hours with no fever, without fever-reducing medication. Common fever-reducing medications are Tylenol, ibuprofen, and aspirin. And your symptoms have improved. If you've had severe illness from COVID-19, such you were admitted to a hospital or you needed oxygen, your healthcare provider may recommend you stay in isolation for longer than 10 days, possibly up to 20 days, sometimes longer, depending on your specific situation. If you tested positive for COVID-19 but had absolutely no symptoms, you will still isolate for 10 days since the day of your positive test. If you develop symptoms after testing positive, you will follow the guidelines above. Quarantine is to keep someone who has been in close contact with someone with COVID away from others. When to quarantine? People who have been in close contact with someone who has COVID-19, excluding those who have had COVID-19 in the past 3 months. If you had a positive test for COVID-19 and is confirmed and you are around another person with COVID-19, you do not need to quarantine or get tested again for up to 3 months. So what counts as close contact? First, you're within 6 feet of someone who has had COVID-19 or who has COVID-19 for 15 minutes or more. You provided care at home to someone who is sick with COVID-19. You had direct physical contact with the person no matter the time. That includes hugging and kissing a person with COVID-19. You shared eating or drinking utensils with a person with COVID-19 in the last 48 hours. If that person has sneezed, coughed, or somehow got respiratory droplets on you. Steps to take. If this is you, you are to stay home and monitor your health. You will stay home for 14 days after your last contact with that person. Watch for fever, cough, shortness of breath, and if possible, stay away from others or people who are high risk in your home. So here's some quarantine scenarios. First, when to start and end quarantine. Scenario 1, close contact with someone who has COVID-19 and you will absolutely, positively have no further contact with them. So essentially, your quarantine starts on day 1. This is the day you last saw them. And they contacted you and said, hey, I had COVID, I saw you last night, or I hugged you last night at a party, a get-together, or church. Therefore, you need to quarantine. So they may find out here they have COVID, but your quarantine, day 1, is the day you last saw them. So you have to stay home for 14 days since the day you last saw them. So you count forward 14 days. You're out of quarantine on the 15th. That includes not going to the grocery store, not going to school, not going to work. You are to stay at home. Scenario 2, you had close contact with someone who has COVID-19. You live with that person, but can avoid further contact, meaning they can isolate away from you in a separate living area, bedroom, and bathroom. So in that case, it's essentially the same. The day that you saw them last or you had contact with them in your home last is day 1 of your quarantine, and then you will extend that for 14 days. Scenario 3, you were under quarantine for a family member. Say I had one child, or my husband got COVID-19 and he isolated away from us in another place. However, 5 days later, I have a child that comes down in the household that I'm taking care of that comes down with symptoms. At that point, your isolation or your quarantine starts over. The 14 days starts over from the latest contact with the sick person. So I would just go ahead. I've already quarantined for 5 days, but my child was sick here. So I would quarantine for another 14 days from contact with that person. However, say I am a mother and this is my child, I'm going to be taking care of my child, therefore I will not isolate from them completely. Then we have scenario 4. My child becomes sick on the 30th, and they're sick for their 10 days, get better, do well. I have to stay home an additional 14 days because the incubation period of COVID-19 is 2 to 14 days, meaning from time of exposure to time of symptoms is 14 days. And during that 10 days, I'm taking care of whoever is sick with COVID in the same household. They are contagious. Therefore, I have to wait until they're not contagious and quarantine 14 days past that. Again, the best way to prevent COVID is to stop it. The best way to stop COVID is to stay socially distanced, cover your nose and mouth with either a mask and when you sneeze and cough with a tissue, frequent hand washing, keep your hands out of your eyes, face, and mouth, clean and disinfect frequently touched surfaces such as tabletops, light switches, doorknobs, stay home if you are sick, and frequent hand washing. Again, I want to reiterate, stay home if you are sick. If you wake up with a sore throat, a runny nose, or a cough, please call your employer or call the school and let them know you're not feeling well. At Fox Clinic, we can test you 7 days a week through the weekend evening clinic, the drive-through clinic during the week for COVID-19 and symptoms. We're trying to stop the spread of this disease so that we can get back to normal life. So Childress, you're doing a great job of crushing COVID. I hope you understand what isolation versus quarantine is now, and I hope you stay well. Thank you.